So one of the things I always encourage people to do when they get started on a design system, or even afterwards, you can still kind of do this stuff, is there's lots of different areas of the organization or different areas of work that you can audit. So this is quite a big deal because through a number of audits, you can get a greater sense of the environment that the design system exists in, who might come into contact with it, methods of communication, all kinds of things. So one thing I'd encourage is to start as if you're not from within the company. Try and put on this kind of fresh hat to try and learn the organization from this perspective of someone working on a design system team. Part of the reason is that you can get quite comfortable with who you know and the structures around you because that's what you do every day. But what becomes really helpful is seeing it through these new eyes. So if you were external and you came into this situation and you were trying to make sense of it, what's the structure of the organization? What are each of these product teams' workflows? Are they the same? Do they say they're the same? Are they all kind of weighted the same in terms of skill sets and seniority? So as you get a sense of the structure of the organization, the structure of product teams or feature teams, and what kind of skill sets you're going to encounter, that gives us a rough idea of who are we making this for? How does it fit into people's workflow? From that, you can often start to look at what audiences you have, which I've talked about before. So then you've got a sense of the organization. You've done a bit of work to understand the structures around people. Then you can do things like a visual audit, which you've probably come across before, which might be breaking down screenshots of your app or your website and trying to notice patterns or things that could be components. And it helps you to get an idea of what currently exists. Is there duplication? Are there things which are slightly misaligned? And you can start to try and categorize it if it isn't already and find more appropriate names for things. Running alongside that, you can do exactly the same with code. So look at what code bases there are with the stuff that's currently used in live. Where is it? Because there may be duplication in code that looks roughly similar on the front end when you see it in the browser. So it's trying to get a sense of these are two parts of the same equation, really. We need to try and audit both to understand what we're working with, the materials that we're working with. And from that, we need to also look at auditing what tooling people use. And that can also be like, what do they use for communication? So we've got an understanding of what is actually out there. So we can look at the design and code. We can look at similarities and differences. And that gives us a scale of the problem as well. So if you're starting off with something brand new, you might be able to look and say we've got duplication of design or inconsistency within Figma, Sketch, or whatever you use. And likewise, you might say, well, across the code bases, we found different implementations of the same component. So there's different angles with essentially the same sort of problem. Perhaps in an ideal world, you'd say that each component should be one-to-one, should be the same in design as it is in code. It should be called the same thing and roughly structured in the same sort of way. So when you're talking about a concept of a button or a form, it's explaining the same object, the same concept in different ways. There should really be no handover or no difference. So when we're thinking about this whole audit process, it's trying to understand the environment around us, who it might affect, however far away from the design team itself they might be, going all the way through to now within the design team, what do we understand? What do we know? What do we have in terms of design assets? What do we have in our code? How similar or different are they? All of this can be documented at the beginning too, because it kind of forms a bit of a story. This is how it is today. This is the extent of the challenge. And so then when you make a better button, or whatever component it might be, there's more to that story then. You can say, well, when we did the audit, we found a button appears here, here, and here in code. And we found these variants in design, which isn't ideal. You might be the first person that's ever found this out. Maybe no one else knows that there's lots of duplication or lots of inconsistency. So capturing that is a massive first step. It also helps if you need to, in some way, justify the work that you're doing on a design system, to be quite clear on, did you know this? There's all this duplication and inconsistency where, as we go, we can tidy this up and not only make it better, which means easier to use, which means more productive. It just makes sense to pay off this debt. This tech debt, this design debt, is going to sit there otherwise. So actually the design system can help clear all this up. It can be quite compelling.